Hey everyone, it's Miss Mellinger, and I'm back to read two more chapters of How to Eat Fried Worms. I'm so glad to see you again. Chapter 9, The Plotters. Geez, you think it'll work? Said Alan to Joe. Suppose it doesn't. He didn't seem to pay much attention today. Don't worry, said Joe. We got him thinking. It takes time. I got it all doped out. Trust me. Chapter 10. Mine was pretty short. Chapter 10, The Fourth Worm. Billy ate steadily, grimacing, rubbing his nose, spreading on more horseradish sauce. Put your finger on your nose if you like horseradish. Tom bent over him, hissing in his ear. Fish, 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 fish. Billy paused, watching Alan and Joe whispering by the door. He swished the last bite round and round in the ketchup and mustard. All of a sudden, he said, "That's not fair. They can't act like that anymore. Every time I swallow, they lean forward as if they expected me to keel over or something. And then, when I don't, they look surprised and shrug their shoulders and nudge each other." "Come on," said Joe. "Cut it out. We can watch you for cripe's sake. We're just standing over here by the window watching you." "No, you're not," said Billy. "You're whispering and acting as if you expected something to happen every time I swallow." "It's nothing," said Joe. "Forget it. Look, we'll turn around and look out the window while you swallow." "What do you mean, it's nothing?" said Billy. "What's nothing?" "Oh, come on," said Alan. "It's just something Joe's father told him the other night." "It's nothing." "What? What?" "It'll just worry you," said Alan. "It's crazy. It's nothing. Forget it." Billy tore the napkin away from his throat. "Tell me." "It's nothing," said Joe. "You know how my father is. He's always yelling about something." "Tell me or it's all off." "Well, look, it's nothing. But the night before last, I was telling Janie about you eating the worms, and my father was on the porch and heard us. So he threw down his newspaper and says, 'Joseph.' So I says, 'Yes, Pa.' And he says, 'Have you eat a worm, Joseph?' And then he grabbed my shoulders and shook me till my hands danced at the ends of my arms like puppets. 'It's for your own good,' he says. So I started out, 'It's not going to do me any good if I shake to pieces, is it?' Janie was wailing. My mother was chewing her apron at the doorway. 'Alfred,' she cries, 'what's he done?' 'He's hauled down the American flag at school and eaten it again.' 'Has he?' 'So what's the point?' yelled Billy. 'Get to the point. What's it all have to do with me?' 'I'm coming to it,' said Joe, wiping his nose. "But I wanted to show you how important it is. I'm sorry, but I wanted to show you how important it was. My father nearly killing me and all." He sneezed, and then Alan began to sneeze and finally had to hobble off into one of those horse stalls, hugging his stomach to recover. "Anyway," said Joe, wiping his nose again and hitching up his Levi's. "So my father told my mother he thought I'd eaten a worm." "A what?" says my mother, dropping her apron and clutching the sides of her head. "A worm," says my father, nodding solemnly. So when my mother fainted, collapsed, all helter-skelter, right there in the doorway, and lay still, her tongue lolling out of her mouth like that. Her red hair spread out beautifully over the door sill. So I, "Will you cut it out?" Billy yelled. "Who cares about your mother? What does it have to do with me?" "I think he's lying," said Tom. "Whoever heard of someone's mother fainting and her tongue hanging out?" "All right," said Joe, stomping around. "All right. Now I won't tell." "You can die, Billy Forrester, and you'll have to carry him home," Tom growled. "All by yourself. Nobody says to me, 'Who cares about your mother?'" "All right, I'm going, Alan," he yelled. "They're insulting my mother. I'm going." "Don't," said Alan, running out of the horse stall and grabbing Joe by the shirt tail. "Don't. You got to tell him. Even your mother'd say so." "Mine too, no matter what he said. Ain't it a matter of life and death?" "I won't," said Joe, starting toward the door. Alan pulled him back. "You got to. How long have we known poor Bill? 6, 7 years? For old time's sake, Joe, because we were all once in kindergarten together." Think of the agony he'll face, Joe. The pain, the blood, the gore. Billy was on his knees by the orange crate, wringing his hands, not daring to interfere. But when Joe glanced sullenly back at him, he whispered, "Please, Joe, for old time's sake." "Well, will you apologize for insulting my mother?" "I do," said Billy. "I do apologize." So Alan and Joe began to sneeze again, and this time had to bend over and put their heads between their legs to recover. Tom, who had been watching them excuse me, much better. Back to where we were. Tom, who had been watching them suspiciously, trying to make out what was going on, started to say something. "Shut up," hissed Billy fiercely, turning on him. "You keep out of it." So Joe went on with his story, how his mother had been carried upstairs to her room, how the doctor had come, shaking his head, how his aunt had sobbed, pulling down all the shades in their house, how that morning his mother had finally come downstairs, for the first time leaning on his aunt's arm, pale and sorrowful. Geez. "How?" "Yeah," said Tom. "Sure. So why? What does eating worms do to you?" "Nobody will tell me," said Joe, opening his eyes wide. "It's been 3 days. 3 days. And nobody will say. It's just like that time my older cousin Lucy got caught in the back seat of her father's Chevrolet with the encyclopedia salesman. Nobody will tell me why there was such an uproar." He wiped his mouth, "But the thing's sure it's worse than poison. Probably." "Crap," said Tom. "Oh, yeah," said Joe. But then he and Alan had another sneezing fit, sprawlingly, helplessly against each other. "Look at them," said Tom to Billy. "They're not sneezing, they're laughing. Come on, eat the last piece and let's get out of here." "You really think so?" said Billy doubtfully. The sneezing did look an awful lot like giggling. "Sure, look at them." Tom gave Alan and Joe a shove. They collapsed in a heap, sneezing uncontrollably. Billy watched them. "Yeah, sure. They weren't sneezing. They were laughing, weren't they?" "Hay fever," gasped Alan. "Hay fever." "Oh, you've never had hay fever before?" said Tom. "How about yesterday or the day before? Come on, Billy, open up." So Billy, half believing Tom and half not, glancing doubtfully at Alan and Joe, allowed Tom to poke the last bite of worm into his mouth and led him out of the barn. Alan and Joe sat up. "It didn't work," said Alan. Joe began to brush the chaff out of his hair. "You wait." He wasn't sure. Tom was, but he isn't eating the worms. "You wait." Billy's worried. He was before, and that's why he said he felt like he was going to throw up. But now he's really worried. Suppose I wasn't lying. "Did you see his face when I said my father shook me? I thought his eyes would bug right out of his head." Ellen laughed. "Oh, geez. Yeah. Oh, it's fine." "And when he said your mother fainted?" Joe stopped brushing the chaff out of his hair. "Except why'd you laugh so much, for cripe's sake? If you'd kept a straight face, even Tom wouldn't have guessed." "Aw, you laughed first. What do you mean?" "Me? I laughed first? I did not." "You did so. You laughed when you yelled." Sorry, someone was just running down the hallway. "You laughed when he yelled at you the first time. You wiped your nose." They went off through the meadow arguing. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure reading with you. That was chapter 10 of How to Eat Fried Worms. I hope you enjoyed it.